that's the template. The template for us to be one with each other is the way that the Father and the Son are one. And your mind can go, we're supposed to be one more than I thought we were supposed to be. Hi, this is Kevin. I'm at a beach in Florida, and this is Hurricane Elsa. So study number 5 in our Voice of John series. This week, we're covering chapters 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17. 5 chapters in the book of John. All these chapters are in one single event. They are at the Last Supper, Jesus' final moments with his disciples, before the next segment that we're going to study. This is where he gets betrayed and mistreated and killed. So during this Last Supper, 5 chapters, Jesus lays out this whole treatise about what it means to be in discipleship with God, a continuing belief in Jesus. If you've been looking at my other videos during this series up to this point, you'll see I've done some discussion about how the author John, he writes this gospel, this account of Jesus, in such a way that he's kind of deconstructing the Christianity, the contemporary Christianity of his day. An overuse of worship places, an overuse of traditions and festivals, and Jesus comes in the story, he kind of overlaps all those things, and he kind of replaces those things with himself. And so John has been deconstructing a lot of overblown notions of what Christianity is supposed to be and how it's supposed to be practiced in order to construct this very simple and original and better message of the gospel, which is belief in Jesus, belief in him and his life and in his teachings, getting that inside of you. Well, now we come to this chapter, and this is like the climax or the high point of John's message within the gospel. Okay, so we know that if we said, what's the climax or the high point of Jesus's life on earth, then we would probably say it's the death and resurrection of him. That's the high point of it. But remember, a gospel book is 2 things. It's an accurate account of Jesus, but it's also a theological message, an agenda of the author who's writing this account. And this story, what we're studying this week, is the high point of John's message. He is going to lay out for 5 chapters what it means, recalling what Jesus said, what it means to be a disciple. Okay? Now, one of the neat backstories of this whole text is that if you look closely enough at it, if you read it enough times, you're going to see little literary hints that there are seams or creases or page-turning moments to go to the next kind of emphasis of what it means to be a disciple. And a lot of people have looked at this with curiosity over the centuries, and they've said, clearly, these 5 chapters are some of the most beautiful and compelling pieces of literature of Jesus' life that exist. But also, it looks like John may have deposited this treatise on discipleship into 7 different parts. Is it possible that as John was apostolically leading his Christian community, that he wanted to give them sort of a formation piece of literature to go through? Is it possible that he laid out 7 different days of readings where the community could chew on and remind one another what they're supposed to be doing as believers in Jesus? Maybe it was for a 1-week annual festival or feast that came around where they just reminded each other of that thing. In the very first portion, you see Jesus and his incredible example of what it means to be a disciple. And this is where he washes his disciples' feet. And it just seems backwards. It seems like it should be the other way around. In fact, John remembers Peter interjecting and saying, no, Jesus, it should be the other way around. Let's try to make it backwards and not do it this way. And it gives Jesus the opportunity to double down on his example. And the whole protest of it makes the story and the example more vivid to the reader than it would if they had all just said, okay, yeah, that's a good idea. In the middle of these 7 different readings is where Jesus gives that wonderful, famous illustration about I am the vine and you are the branches. abide in me. There's a lot of different parts that are real gold in this whole segment. But the one that I guess I would point out is in Jesus' final high priestly prayer. He says to his Father, he says, you know how you and I, you the Father and I the Son are one. And we know that is a magnificent way in which they are one, right? He says, the way that you and I are one, in the same way, will you make them be one with each other? That's the template. The template for us to be one with each other is the way that the Father and the Son are one. And your mind can go, we're supposed to be one more than I thought we were supposed to be one. Many scholars and theologians and ecumenical councils have had discussions over the centuries about in which way is God one within the Godhead. And they've come up with terms like indivisibility and without confusion and irreversible order. But what it really ends up amounting to is that if you have the Father, then you will always have the Son. And if you have the Son, then you can't separate them. You can't say we're going to have one and we're not going to have the other. You can't do that. If you are doing that, then you have something else going on. Think about what that means for us. When we're in different groups or distinct groups following God in our communities, if I am what I am in a way that excludes what they are, then I got something else going on. Another oneness aspect within the Godhead is called without confusion. In other words, because the Father and the Son are one, that doesn't make their uniquenesses dissolve into confusion, and they don't become a blur. It's not like I can't tell what the Father even means anymore. I can't tell what the Son even means anymore. No, instead, what happens is that they become even more distinct. They magnify each other's uniqueness. And think about how that would apply to us. If we are in a community belonging to one another, we can't do it in a way where we have to give up the integrity of who we are. No, we actually maintain our uniquenesses, and those are actually highlighted in the way that we are one. And there's this other concept of irreversible order, and it has something to do with, the Father is not standing around glorifying himself, and the Son's not they're glorifying, they're highlighting one another, loving one another. And think about that in a community. If we belonged sort of to different kind of groups, or we had different styles of following Jesus, that we wouldn't so much make so much about ourselves as much as we would regard and make much ado about others. I just think that's a fascinating part of Jesus's treatise on discipleship, is that Father, in the same way that you and I are one, would you please also make them be one with each other? Anyhow, hope you got something out of that. Catch you next time. Peace out.